Hello, welcome to The Fast and the Curious, and oh my goodness me, what a race we have just seen. I'm calling it one of the best Grand Prix in years, another classic Canadian Grand Prix. Now, Greg James is on holiday, what a race he's missed. Betty Glover's working in Australia. If you're listening to the last podcast, know I'm out covering the race for Formula One here in Canada. So I'm probably best placed to check in with the Fast and the Curious to do a post-race podcast. But I'm Billy No Mates. I need a friend. And I have found a friend, a proper friend of the Fast and the Curious, and a friend to thousands of people watching the race at home from Sky Sports F1, David Croft. It is a pleasure to have you back on the Fast and the Curious.
Hello, mate. Pleasure's all mine, to be honest. It's quite nice, isn't it, that some of us are still loyal and we want to actually go to the Grand Prix and we care about Formula One. We're not flying away on holiday or going to Australia.
To cover football. Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, we like a bit of football, so we won't give Betty too much stick. But yeah, they've missed an absolute cracker. Right, Crofty, I want to deal with the race in a second. But first, we are just on the outskirts of the circuit, and we can see, actually, from the circuit, all the fans teaming out. What a special atmosphere it's been in Canada. Just give us an insight. Lots of people listening to this will have never been to this Grand Prix. It's on an island for a start. What's it like? It's
small, compact, and bijou, and that's not the estate agent's brochure. That is the Ile Notre Dame. It's a man-made island, and it's been brilliant for Formula One in terms of the races over the years. I love Montreal. I think it's a proper Grand Prix party city, and it's great to see everyone having the best weekend whenever we have a Grand Prix here. And we had a record attendance this year of 350,000 over the weekend too.
Yeah, and I was in Montreal town centre last night. The fans, or city centre I should say, were absolutely soaking up the atmosphere. Where
did you go last night?
Oh, we were just right in the centre to a little burger bar. A great big table with a bunch of Aston Martin fans on it next to me. They're having a lovely little time.
Have you tried Schwartz's Deli yet? Have you gone and done the pastrami sandwich?
I have to admit, I've spent far too long working this weekend and not enough time checking out things like that.
It's open till 11 and it's very handy to pop down.
A bit of traffic I've been caught in. But it was special for me, Crofty, I have to say, to be on the circuit because I went for a track run on Thursday night and Fernando Alonso went past me, Lewis Hamilton went past me, and I've watched Sky for years covering this Grand Prix. Always been one of my favourites. 2011 Canadian Grand Prix, probably my favourite race of all time when Jenson won. So I have loved being here this weekend. I've loved being on the circuit. It's like I'm here. I'm in the telly. I'm on the game. It feels very surreal.
I remember 2011 too. Karun Chandhok and I were in the old commentary box. We were working for BBC Radio, and we spent 5 hours talking to each other, which is, it's not something that we hate doing. We love long, deep conversations, but even that tested Karun's staying power, and it went on for so long I actually forgot that I'd had a tenner each way on Jenson Button to win the race.
2011 worked out well for you.
14-1.
Still didn't buy dinner with that.
Karun Chandhok.
Hi, Karun. Come on in. We're on the Fast and Curious podcast. That's good timing. You're right. I didn't buy dinner.
No, you didn't. I've got to actually go to the Skypad, but I'll let Christian's flexing his biceps a lot.
Yeah, it's because he's been on the track run.
I'm gonna have to send a picture to Greg and Betty about this. There's a lot of bicep flexing here.
Thank you. It's just a normal t-shirt.
It's not just a normal t-shirt at all. You're look. I've been pumping iron. Look at the guns, ladies and gentlemen.
I hadn't realised it had ridden up a little bit.
The only person who's got his arms out more than you this weekend is Zach Brown, and that's because he's had a tattoo.
Right. Bye. I'm going to do some work.
Bye, Karun. In my defence, I've ran out the circuit to come and see you, and I am sweaty and my t-shirt's ridden up. I wasn't purposefully getting naked.
Karun and I had a big argument that day about the bridge down just beyond turn 2.
Yes.
And I said, it's so misty and murky here, you can't see the bridge. And Karun's like, there isn't one. I went, well, there is. And when it eventually brightened up, I did something. Jenson Button leads them down the main straight towards turn 2 where you can clearly see the bridge just beyond the corner.
Rubbing it in.
Oh, yeah, there's a bridge there, isn't there? I've been telling you that, mate, for about an hour and a half. That was quite the weekend.
We should bridge the gap between our ramblings and actually talk about the race.
Slick.
You can tell I've been listening to you, Crofty, can't you? And we should talk about the race, which, of course, Max Verstappen won from Lando Norris 2nd, George Russell 3rd, Lewis Hamilton 4th, Oscar Piastri rounding out the top 5. Let's start at the very top, Crofty. I speak on this podcast a lot about Max winning races that maybe other people would trip up on, and that's another good example. They got the calls right this weekend. Max kept it on the black stuff, slippy conditions. That's another one where the world champion earns his money, isn't it?
they sent the strategist, Steve Knowles, up onto the podium to collect the Constructors' Trophy. And I think that was the right decision.
Yes.
This was a day where the strategist really helped, where the feedback from the drivers was so important because they're out there, they know the conditions. But then you've got to make the right calls with it. And very much Red Bull made the right calls. Now, you can argue they got very lucky with a safety car. Lando Norris at that time was absolutely flying. He would have been very difficult to catch without a safety car. Because he was doing so well, he didn't have time to have the chat with the McLaren team to say, shall we box, shall we stay out, shall we box, shall we stay out, that Max had, because he was 8 seconds further back. And as a result, Lando stayed out for extra laps. And that was the defining moment. But what goes around comes around. You can argue Lando in Miami, and he's mentioned that himself, was a moment where Lando had the benefit of a little piece of luck.
Just to clear that up, you see that as unfortunate for Lando and McLaren rather than an out-and-out mistake in terms of the positioning on the track. Because that's a question I've seen on social. Was that a bit of a cock-up, or was that just unfortunate?
In hindsight, it was a dreadful mistake, but no, it wasn't. This is a race where fractions of a second can win or lose you a Grand Prix, or can cost you a position or make you a position. And they didn't have that opportunity to get that done at the time where Red Bull did. It's not mistakes. It's just the way some things fall for people better and some things fall for people worse.
Unfortunate for Lando, but a great P2. Good points for McLaren. He'll be, broadly speaking, happy with that, even though it's a race on another day, might have won. George Russell, I want to talk to you about, Crofty, because...
Now, these are mistakes, I think, from George Russell we're going to talk about now.
Well, I want to get your views, because obviously Lewis looked quick at the start of the weekend. George gets on pole position, does really well, and then at one point in the race, it looks like he's thrown away a podium to his teammate, but then to his credit, is later able to overtake Lewis Hamilton. So two questions. How do you rate George Russell this weekend? And the second question to that is, where does Lewis sit within this now?
Well, I think you rate George. I'd give him a 7 out of 10.
Sure.
His pole lap was fabulous. He was leading the race well. He was managing it, but he was under pressure. Little mistakes, couple of little errors crept in that then eventually cost him victory and could have cost him a podium as well. But the way he recovered and pulled that move on Lewis Hamilton, that was super. That was the George Russell that has Toto Wolff saying, he's the future of my team. He's going to lead this team.
It sort of summarises where we are with George in Formula One, doesn't it? This race. Flashes of really brilliant speed, pole position, could have won the race, and yet has made those mistakes that people do use as a stick to beat him with, that we see slightly too often.
Yeah, 113th race for George Russell as well, same as Lando Norris. I think Lando makes less errors than George does, and I think George, no one needs to beat him with a stick. He beats himself up a little bit when it comes to those errors, and maybe he needs to stop being a little too hard on himself.
You can get in your own head as a racing driver, can't you?
You can. And the psychology of racing, I find that absolutely fascinating. As for Lewis, he might be a bit irked that George had the opportunity to get past him. And I do wonder if Lewis was staying at Mercedes next year, would they have said just hold station towards the end?
Yeah.
They didn't. I'm glad they didn't, because we want to see overtakes on the track. It was a much more encouraging performance for Mercedes and for Lewis. That's his first top four finish of the season in a Grand Prix. Obviously, he finished second in the Shanghai Sprint. First podium of the season for Mercedes. We're in the 9th race, which shows how bleak things have been for them a little bit. But it's something to build on.
Sure. Oscar Piastri was 5th. Who at one stage looked like he could be in the mix for a podium.
Yeah, but his tyres fell away a bit towards the end, and that took him out of that top 5. Shame for Oscar. A more straightforward race, I think he definitely would have been on the podium.
I'm going to skip through Aston Martin, 6th with Fernando Alonso, 7th with Lance Stroll.
Let's just not skip through Aston Martin, and let's just say well done, Lance Stroll.
Yes.
Okay, so there's two stats for Lance Stroll for you today. You're going to love them both,
Go on.
sure. Not only is that the 5th point scoring finish in 6 starts in what is his home race, And I know the points finishes are a lot different to when they were back in the day, but he now holds the record for the most points ever scored by a Canadian driver here at the Gilles Villeneuve circuit.
Hey, lovely.
There you go.
He'll be happy with that. Lovely job. Solid if unspectacular from Aston Martin in 6th and 7th, but they are...
What have you got against Aston Martin tonight?
Well, hang on. I was about to say, but they think upgrades are on the way. They're optimistic about the future, they say. Let's see. They'll want to be pushing for podiums like they were last year.
Yep.
And the reason I wanted to skip through Aston Martin's because I wanted to speak about Daniel Ricciardo, who on Sky Sports this weekend, you guys had Jacques Villeneuve as a guest, and boy was he worth the booking. Who was obviously, pretty feisty with his comments on Daniel. Possibly his strongest weekend of the season, Crofty.
Miami Sprints. He finished fourth in that, and that was a very strong race at a sharper end, but he didn't do it in the
race.
Grand Prix.
Yeah, sure.
You could say that he had a 5-second penalty for that jump start. That didn't help his race today. I think the thing with Daniel Ricciardo, and I try and see a balance here. If there were more weekends like this, then people like Jacques Villeneuve wouldn't stand there and say, why is Daniel Ricciardo still in Formula One? He's in a position where he's at a team whose raison d'etre has been to bring on young drivers in the future. Daniel is not a young driver. I mean, he's still a young man compared to me, but he's 34 now. He's not a young driver. So he's in a seat at a team whose position in the Red Bull family is to bring young drivers through. Liam Lawson is no doubt a spectacular driver for the future who deserves a seat. And people will ask questions. If Daniel's not performing, then they'll ask questions why he's getting that seat ahead of Liam Lawson. But as Formula One, there's that pressure on every single driver.
You could say that this is the very least we should be seeing from Daniel Ricciardo, sticking it in the points like this, because that's what Yuki's been doing, and this RB isn't anywhere near as bad as it was feared before pre-season testing. They came to testing, it was like, oh, hang on, this car's all right, we can stick this in the points.
It's getting better.
It's getting better. Speaking of which, Alpine in 9th and 10th.
Yeah.
A first double points finish of the season. I think I'm right in saying for them, isn't it, Crofty?
Yeah, it is, and that could be absolutely crucial for them, to be fair. I know it's only 3 points, but that is priceless points, and Williams will be thinking, here we are, double DNF.
Poor old Alex, a total passenger.
Nothing he could do about that. Logan, I'm sure he could have done a bit more to stop himself spinning out, but that's 3 points that could prove, there's a significant difference by the end of the season.
Absolutely. And but proof, if you stay out of trouble on track in a race like this, you're going to pick up points.
Correct.
Which, as you said with Logan Sargent, is another example of why it's highly unlikely he won't be in that seat next season, because that Williams had the pace to finish in the top 10 if it had stayed on track and stayed out of trouble.
With all due respect to Logan Sargent, your number one target at Williams is Carlos Sainz. They've admitted that. There's a very good chance Carlos Sainz will go there. And even if Carlos Sainz doesn't, there are better drivers on the market than Logan Sargent, who has really not proved himself in a way that you would need to be considered for that Williams seat for a third year.
Yeah, Bottas and Ocon on the market as well. Crofty, the biggest question, I had a very brief look in the Fast and Curious Instagram page before running out of the circuit to come and speak to your good self. And I saw a lot of questions saying, obviously, not just what happened to Ferrari in terms of we saw Charles had engine problems and Carlos spun, but what happened to the overall pace? Because I was talking to people in the paddock on Thursday morning and people were tipping Ferrari for another win.
Yeah, but the wheels hadn't turned by that stage. That's the thing. Ferrari know why they were slow this weekend, but they're not necessarily saying it. And then it was like a perfect storm for them, wasn't it? They had the engine issue with Charles Leclerc when he came in for that pit stop to go onto the hard tyre and sat there for 25 seconds. He switched the car off and reset it. It's like a control delete.
That's exactly what I wrote in my notes.
Exactly. Love it. Which made the difference, and that sorted it all out. It was a software problem, but he lost so much pace by then and then got lapped by Max Verstappen, and that's a key moment on a weekend where Ferrari could have overtaken Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship. Here we are, Max Verstappen lapping Charles Leclerc. As for Carlos Sainz, he was in a battle, wasn't he? He was trying to get back up into the points. He lost it coming out of the chicane, collected Alex Albon in the meantime, spun round, cut the grass, and then eventually retired. But they never had the pace.
No.
It's a bit of an outlier of a track. I think they'll be back on it again in Barcelona. but that is not the consistency needed to mount a serious Constructors' Championship challenge. I hope they'll be back and forming part of what I think is now a quadruple challenge at the front. Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes.
Now, speaking of Red Bull, we know Sergio Perez has got what seems to be a 1+1 contract at Red Bull.
I think that's the numbers Christian got to at the end of his sentence.
Yeah, he's for anyone who's not aware, Christian said a few different things on this, actually in one case, in one interview this weekend, but it seems to be, here's 1 year on your deal, do this well, another one will happen straight away. If not, we'll have a check. But listen, I've always said this, Crofty, I don't know if you agree with me. We've seen what they do in the past. If he's too disappointed, they'll bin him off anyway. That it doesn't really mean too much contract in some areas.
Yeah, I mean, they'll have to pay him off. I think
they've got some cash though, haven't they? They sell some drinks, don't they?
Exactly. Well, and Sergio helps them sell a lot of drinks in North America.
Oh, as we see when we go to the likes of Mexico and Austin, Texas.
Yeah, and sells a lot of merch as well.
Yeah.
Where were we? Sergio Perez. He.
Well, what I was going to ask you, I don't think I actually asked you a question, Crofty, to be fair to you, which is excellent presenting for me. But last year, solid start to the season, got to Miami, all went wrong. Seems to have happened again this year.
Yeah, exactly. Solid start to the season for Sergio Perez, who was second, fifth, second, and third up until China. Fourth in Miami. That's okay.
Yeah.
And then eighth, DNF.
But it's not just those positions; it's also the pace. It's getting out of Q1.
It's qualifying. Qualifying isn't there for him. This is not a great track for him anyway. It hasn't been a great track over the years. If you look at his record, he's got a best qualifying of 8th in 2017. He's cost neutral, as it were, to Red Bull. He brings a lot of sponsorship in. That helps pay his wages. He's very good commercially, but they need him on track to be doing what he was doing at the start of the season. Barcelona is a big test for Sergio Perez because there's no excuses in Barcelona. Their car should go well. He knows the track. Look, he's 0.3 on average off his teammate in qualifying. Get that right, then the racing might become easier.
Crofty, just finally, what a classic Grand Prix. I loved that race. It's one of those that reminds me why I love this sport so much.
I love it when we go into a race and we don't know who's going to win, or we haven't got a strong idea of who's going to win. And then halfway through the race, we still haven't got a strong idea of who's going to win. And probably the last 10 laps, we're not quite sure how it's all going to pan out. And I love a race where everyone has to perform at the highest level, in the garage, in the cockpit, in the commentary box, if we ever do that.
Oh, you do. You're Martin Brundle on form.
We try. But you've got to have your wits about you. And it was brilliant. And look, as we sit at the moment, the rain has come back down again and everyone's going to get soggy going home.
Yeah.
We had just enough rain, just enough dry, just enough rain, just enough dry. The conditions were perfect. The racing, I thought, was absolutely exceptional. My favourite race of the season so far.
Absolutely, me too. Just before the race, I had a message from Dan Raven on Instagram. He said, fingers crossed for a great race. It's my birthday today. Dan, you got a good race for a birthday. And a McLaren win would make my birthday, as would a shout out from you guys on the Fast and Curious when you do the race debrief. Crofty, would you like to say happy birthday to Dan? And he didn't quite get a win, but he got a podium, didn't he?
This is some sort of cameo thing that's going on here.
We'd just like to look after the listeners and give a few a shout out.
20 quid in an envelope, Dan, to the Fast and Curious podcast. Care of Greg James travel budget, Betty Glover expenses, and can we get Christian Hugel home in time for the next race? Happy birthday, Dan, you lovely man. I'm really sorry that McLaren didn't get the win to celebrate your birthday and the anniversary of their first ever win in Formula One, 56 years ago today. Bruce McLaren, Spa, 1968. But they tried their hardest.
Hey, Dan, you got a Crofty fact for your birthday. We love that. Absolutely love it. Before Crofty and I head off, can I just check, Crofty, if you're aware of the work of our good friends at NordVPN? Because we talk about them a lot on this podcast. And we talk about them a lot because...
I've heard of their work.
You've heard of their work. Well, if you're not using it, you're missing out on Crofty. Because I've had my virtual location set to the UK while I've been out here, which means I've been able to catch up with all the latest F1 news and highlights in all the same places I do when I'm back home.
Can I just say that was possibly the best segue promotion since I last said, if you're watching on Sky Stream, Sky Q, Sky Glass, or now you can press your interactive button on your remote control.
Well, you'd say that in a commentary, Crofty, but I'd say that having NordVPN on all my devices also means my private data, like bank details and passwords, have been kept safe while I'm away and using public Wi-Fi, and that their threat protection means you're protected from viruses, malicious malware, and phishing sites whenever you're online. And Crofty, you'll be at pretty much every race for the rest of the season, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So NordVPN is an absolute no-brainer from you. And Crofty, if you wanted to get it, you could get the best discount off your NordVPN plan by going to nordvpn.com/TFATC. And our link will, Crofty, give you an extra 4 months on the 2-year plan. And there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the description of this episode.
2 things
Okay.
I want to add to that. A, what's wrong with fishing sites? A lot of people like fishing. There's a lot of fish in Canada that they might want to be catching and cooking for their tea.
Right.
And I think that you're ostracizing people who like angling, maybe have a net or a rod and want to go out fishing. I think that's unfair.
After this podcast, I'll chat to Crofty about the difference in fishing, but sure. You said 2 things to add to it.
Yeah, secondly, I would like now, with the British Grand Prix coming up, for someone to put what Christian had just read on a T-shirt, and we'll see if the crowd can respond.
I do say a lot that NordVPN should get me a hat to wear, because my little home setup that we've spoken on, I've got all the team's hats behind me, and I need a NordVPN hat behind me.
You need one of those hats that we had in Canada last year that actually had a digital screen on the hat, and you could actually flash up your message on the hat. There was a lady that I met, and she had lights out and away we go on her hat. She made it herself. It was brilliant.
I can't remember exactly what I tweeted, but I did tweet Abu Dhabi last year, something like, I bet Crofty will be celebrating the end of the season's read for the Sky Q, and then a new version this year, alas.
What I love about that, though, and I can tell you the figures, everybody, that when I say it on air, we then get a lot of people pressing the button and logging on to see any one of the 20 onboards and listen to the team radios. And it is a brilliant facility that we can offer people. And it's, it's been a long time in the making. And I know a lot of people get a lot of enjoyment out of riding on board. So if you want to do that at any of the races this season, don't forget, Sky Sports are exclusively live at every single race. And if you want to press your red button, please do. Oh, I can't say that. Interactive button.
Can't say red button.
Yeah, it's not red on now.
Didn't know that. There we go. Well, we don't want to exclude the Now TV community,
No,
do
don't.
we?
Well, we don't
or
want
the
to-
angling community.
Or to be pedantic, the Now community, because it's not Now TV.
Oh, no.
And the fraught nature of modern day broadcasting, ladies and gentlemen, is right there.
I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot in this debrief.
We try.
We
I've
try,
learned a
don't we?
lot too. Which arm are you going to put the tattoo of Max Verstappen winning in Canada to celebrate your first visit to Montreal?
I don't know. I'm not a needle person. I'm not.
Neither was Zach Brown.
Neither was Zach Brown. No, I'm going to end this podcast quite quickly before I end up agreeing to something. Listen, a lot of people will have been listening to our pre-race show where we did our Silverstone competition. Crofty, we're giving people tickets to win the chance to win tickets to the British Grand Prix. We will be discussing that in our next episode. So, of course, don't forget to hit subscribe for all the information you need on that, and the podcast will drop magically into your inbox. Me and some presenters, I'll be honest with you, I don't know which ones. I don't know where Greg and Betty are in the world, let alone whether they're going to be on the next podcast.
I don't care.
No, quite. I'll be back in the week alongside someone else from the world of F1, David Croft from Sky Sports F1. Thank you so much, sir. It's been an utter pleasure.
Pleasure, mate. Take
I
care.
am literally going to get on a plane in a matter of hours. Goodbye from Canada. Goodbye from me and Crofty. This has been Fast and the Curious.